right, so there's something kind of funny that happens with the 1X and 2X. So this is the 1X, this is the 2X camera. And I don't know if you noticed, but it's switching back and forth between the two rear cameras. So I'll block the 2X camera and it'll switch back to the 1X camera. You can see it flipping back and forth. It just does it automatically. I guess it just depends on how much brightness it's getting. So we'll go back to the 1X, back to the 2X, and you can see it's shifting back and forth between the two of them. It's kind of flipping back and forth. So I'm going to block that 2X, and it'll flip back to the regular camera, but zoomed in 2X. So it's doing like a digital zoom instead of an optical zoom. I'm blocking the 1X camera right now. The 1X camera is blocked. I'm going to go 2X. And it's still using the 1X camera. That's weird. So I guess it gets the light information from the 1X camera and then determines if it's going to switch to the 2X. So I can zoom and it's just doing a digital zoom on the 1X camera. Okay, so now it switched. So now I'll cover the 1X, and for some reason it switched back to the 1X. There's some weird algorithm that's causing the thing to flip back and forth. And the other interesting thing is, if you go to Pro mode and you go and do a 2X shot, and we're going to take the shot. All right, I'm going to go into the gallery. So there's the quote-unquote zoomed in, the 2X shot. Oops. So the RAW is capturing the full sensor shot of the 1X camera, and then the JPEG, my mistake, the JPEG is the one that's doing the zoomed in. So I don't even think it's actually using the 2X camera for the 2X Pro shots. I guess because it has better resolution or better lighting. So there's definitely some weird trickery going on with the cameras, and I wish there was a way that I could consistently capture with the 2X camera, but unfortunately there's no way to really do it. You just have to kind of hope that the software does what you want it to do. It's a little bit cold this morning, but here's some of the footage with at 4K 60. Unfortunately, this is going to be downsampled to 1080p 60 for the YouTube video. Dynamic range isn't too bad. I mean, that's shooting directly into the sun. Stabilization is not that great. I'm just walking at a steady pace. You can see from my shadow, and it's got a bit of shake to it. I'm going to go ahead and switch to 30 frames a second 4K, and the stabilization gets a whole lot better. Alright, so this is the 4K test, the stabilization test at 30 frames a second. It's two hands, one hand, not too bad. And then I'm going to drop it down to 1080p, and we'll check out the stabilization at 1080p. Alright, so here's 1080p at 60 frames a second, and I've just noticed something else about flipping between 30 and 60 frames a second on this camera. So I'm going to take this back inside after I do the 30 frames a second and show y'all something else that I just noticed. And this is 1080p at 30 frames a second. So I'm holding this one hand, and I'm actually going to speed up a little bit, and the stabilization, it looks like it's doing optical and electronic at the same time. I'm gonna do another little jog, and so you can see how it's handling the stabilization. I look like a weirdo running around my backyard like this. Anyway. So another interesting thing that I noticed while I was playing around with the video portion of this is that when you switch from 30 frames a second to 60 frames a second, it looks like 60 frames a second must be shot from the wide angle, which would, I guess, be the primary camera. And then when you go to 30 frames a second, it does a pretty extreme crop, which looks like it might be even going into the 2X camera. I'm not even really sure about that. But this is at FHD. I mean, like full HD, it's going and it's doing at 60 frames a second. I guess there's no stable, like, I guess the stabilization isn't what it is. Like, so even, okay, we'll go to 4K. We're up at 4K now. And it's the same thing, you know, it does a sensor crop at 30 frames a second. It crops in, I guess, to provide that digital stabilization. But that's kind of odd because you would think that at full HD, it should be able to stabilize at 60 frames. But apparently at 60 frames, it can't do it. It's the same as 4K. So we'll drop down to HD. Oh, and I lose the option to even change or choose the frame rate at HD. That's interesting. Huh. So I don't know. There's a lot of little quirks within the camera app. It's kind of hard to explain, but hopefully I'll get the gist of it through this video. Yeah, that's so weird. 30. And then see. Okay, so now, okay, I'm back at 4K and I'm flipping back and forth between 30 and 60, and it's not doing any sort of crop. So we're at 30. I'm gonna go back to 60. Come on, there we go. What? Is it a lighting thing? Is it, I don't know. It's just so wacky switching between these cameras. I don't even know. I don't even know how to explain this, but that is so strange. There's some weird magics going on with these cameras. I'm not even sure. So I gotta be honest. I wish there was just one single camera. I don't really have much use for a telephoto, and it's also so unpredictable that it's kind of hard to know what to do. And I don't even know. I'm not a big fan of this setup, but it is what it is. Some of the other interesting bugs that the operating system has is that it'll do weird things, like where I'm going to jump into one of these notifications, and sometimes it will open the app, but it'll leave the notification shade up. Okay, there you go. So I got it to do it. It opened the app in the background, but it still has left the notification shade down. So you got to swipe to the bottom and swipe up, or hit the back button to go into the notification. And the other bug is that in the settings, I have the phone ringtone set to silent, but it won't let me change the notification to silent. So I've selected silent, I come back out, and the default notification sound is back to nib. There's this weird glitch with that I cannot get it to go to silent. I have an app called Shouter that announces the name of each app. I had it set to silent so that I just get the name of the app and no notification sound. But for some reason the OS has a glitch in it that's forcing it to do this. This is the only phone that's ever done that. Let me show you one more time. Selecting silent, I'm going to go back, and it's back to nib. Also, you can see that I am on the latest version of Android available for the Exodus 1. I'm on Android 9 with a security patch of October 1st, 2019, and you can see that I'm up to date. I also did a camera app comparison. So I run through the HTC app that comes with the phone, Open Camera, a hacked Google Camera app, and an app called A Better Camera. So you'll see those abbreviated as HTC for the HTC camera, OPN for Open Camera, GOO for Google Camera, and ABC for A Better Camera. I start off by taking photos with no HDR enabled, just a basic photo. Unfortunately, the Google Camera app would not give me a photo without HDR plus or HDR turned on. So it's represented by a black photo on this first grouping of photos. The second group of photos is taken with HDR on, and it follows the same order of the HTC camera, the Open Camera, Google Camera, and ABC. And you can see them all here side by side. My favorite being the Google Camera on this set of shots. It has the best coloring, it has the best dynamic range. The ABC camera's HDR is alright, but it's very washed out color-wise. This last grouping is the most extreme high dynamic range that I could pull out of each of the apps. To do that with the HTC camera, I actually had to go into Pro mode, and unfortunately the highlights were blown out so that I could expose for the room. Here's the shot from the open camera. Here's the shot from the Google camera. And here's the shot from ABC. As you can see from this grouping, ABC has the brightest photo of all, which would be the most ideal to edit. Its color profile is a little bit exaggerated, but in the settings you can actually tone that down to be less exaggerated and more of a natural color. When you compare all of these side by side, I think that ABC would be a clear winner in this photo, although Google would be a definite second best. Here are all of the HTC images side by side as I go through the regular shot, HDR shot, and then Pro mode shot. These are the open camera shots as I go from standard, HDR, or dynamic range optimization, DRO, up to HDR. This is the Google camera going from standard to HDR plus to night mode. And this is ABC camera going from standard to dynamic range optimization to HDR.